Very much, and I want to say thank you to Coronado. And I'm looking down the end. I see Joe's doghouse is still out there. Maxine has to put him in it, and so I want to say to you, this is my community. This is what I work for. And before I get started, I want to acknowledge Councilmember Nat Bates down there, which I hope to be working with in the future as a mayor. So, what is Corky about? The same thing he's always been about. The black and brown community and everybody else. I've always fought for everybody on the south side. If you've been reading the newspaper, it said Corky is tenacious with making sure that he stands up for the District 3 south side of town. And that's what I do. My business has been here, my property has been here, and I'm not going anywhere. I started this off with the police department. If you folks remember, I used to ride with Andre Hill and Sean Pickett. I rode for 5 years to know what's going on in our police department. City Hall has a problem right now. The RPA has really created a problem, and it's hurting us big time. If you haven't had a chance to look at the budget is off the charts. It's just not. We're losing money going out of style. And I read yesterday that we are the 10th people that people do not want to loan money to. That's bad. This city is looking at maybe going into bankruptcy down the road if we don't deal with our unfunded liabilities. Also, I want to make sure that Southside and District 3 is treated like, if you remember, I had an article written called The Tale of Two Cities, and it was Point Richmond and the South Side. We never got our streets done. We never had things cleaned up. We could never get anything done on this side. Up there by Tradeways right now, there's a vacant lot. I, 10 years ago, did an article on that lot with weeds and trash and hypodermic needles. It's still there. When are we going to be treated equal like the rest of the city of Richmond? That's what I'm about. That's what I've always been about. And you know me, I don't back down. Sometimes people don't like the way I do things, but guess what? I get them done. That's the main thing, getting them done. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Robinson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Doria Robinson, and I feel like I want to introduce myself to everybody because I don't think everybody really knows who I am. I feel so honored to be here today because I was born and raised in this neighborhood. You know, I actually grew up on 445th Street, across from the Nevin Center. And my grandparents, Bishop Vernon Robinson, actually established a church on South 13th Street in Ohio. That's my family's church. All my family lived here in this neighborhood my whole life. My great-grandfather moved here, and he actually lived in Eastern Village for most of his life. He sold pies and everything out of his little apartment there, along with my great-grandmother. And I live in my great-aunt's house currently, where I raised my twins as a single mom over across the street from Nevin, from Eastern on South 12th Street. I have been here my whole life, except for the time that I went for college, which was great to be able to go to college. Not only have I lived here in Richmond my whole life, but for the last 16 years of my life, I've developed an organization called Urban Tilth that has been utterly dedicated to making things better in this neighborhood. In the Iron Triangle in North Richmond, we're building a farm in North Richmond right now. Not just a farm, but a place where youth can gather. It's a $22 million project that we're doing. It will employ, I think the total number will be 66 people will have jobs, living wage jobs out of that project, helping to serve food to families in Richmond. Right now, today, my organization serves 500 families every week. Food that we grow, and food that we grow with 10 partner farmers within 100 miles of Richmond. We've helped to bring millions of dollars to Richmond, and that's just the beginning. Helping to redo what was happening on the Richmond Greenway. All the things you see here today are all the projects of my work. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. This is what I fight for, and I've been fighting for it for over 20 years, and I'm not going to stop.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Garcia, your 2 minutes.
It's wonderful to see all the blue shirts today. Coronado, we need to step it up, definitely in the Iron Triangle, seeing all the Coronado shirts today. Really nice to be here today with everyone. My name is Oscar Garcia. I'm born and raised in the Iron Triangle in Central. I'm a product of the local schools, graduated from Kennedy, and have lived in Central all of my life. But I grew up riding my bike to go to Johnny's Diner and to the Paper Shack to buy the penny candy because that's all I could afford at the time. And over the last couple years, I've worked here in the community as president of the Iron Triangle Neighborhood. I've worked alongside all of the neighborhood councils in District 3, and we've worked together to help advocate for all of you. One of the main issues, as mentioned today by the police chief, is the decimation of our police department. In the last 7 years, our police department has been reduced by 40%. And guess who's most impacted by those cuts? District 3. How many of you have been trying to call the police department and they don't even show up? And it's getting worse. I've done door knocking in every single neighborhood in the district, and that's one of the main complaints, in addition to the city streets being filthy. They're not listening to us. They're not giving us any attention, but I'm here and I'm hearing you, and you are all going to be my focus, and I will be pushing to reverse all of these changes that are negatively impacting District 3. So in addition to that, I also have a plan to bring in some jobs. We need those in District 3. And I just realized I ran out of time, but thank you all for being here today. Please listen to all the candidates and see who truly has a plan to address the issues most affecting you here in District 3. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, while the microphone is still in your hand, I'm going to pose the very first question to you. And that question is, public safety is a hot topic in the city of Richmond. If elected, how will you approach getting more public safety services? This is not only police officers, but will include parking enforcement, code enforcement, Office of Emergency Services, fire services, or safety, and community policing. Mr. Garcia, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you very much. So I was recently endorsed by the East Bay Times precisely because I have a plan to address the essentially elimination of our police department. My main priority will be focused on recruitment and retention. The chief actually alluded to the necessity of hiring our youth. We have a lot of youth who are probably would benefit from either being police officers, firefighters, or just working for the city. These are really good paying jobs. And I feel like the city's not doing a good enough job working on this relatively large young population we have, especially here in District 3, to ensure that we have our local youth with these jobs. I also will be focused on treating our officers with the respect that they deserve. Over the last couple years, you just keep hearing that they're underappreciated, their jobs are going to be eliminated, and that's why they're leaving in droves. These are issues that are not affecting nearby San Pablo and Pinole. San Pablo is actually taking a lot of our officers. They have a fully staffed police department, whereas we can't even retain them because our city council is treating them like they're not worthy employees of the city. And we need to change that, and that's why I was endorsed by the East Bay Times, because I'm the only candidate or one of the candidates that has expressed strong support for the police department. Thank you.
Thank you for the response, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Robinson, same question. Would you like me to read the question again?
Sure.
Public safety is a hot topic in the city of Richmond. If elected, how will you approach getting more public safety services? This is not only police officers, but will include parking enforcement, code enforcement, Office of Emergency Services, fire safety, and community policing. Ms. Robinson, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. So I would start where Chief Bisa French ended, and that is we need to recruit. You know, today we have, what did she say, 40 open vacancies within the police department, 10 in the call center. I have a lot of relationships with firefighters because we work with me a lot on the park projects that we have. They tell me every day how they're working double, triple shifts, and they really need more firefighters hired. So what I would do is completely focus on filling those vacancies and filling them first and filling them now, and actually also work on the two-way street that the police relationship with community should be. It's a, relationship takes two parties, right? The police have their role, but they also have their role with us. And I have been living in this community my whole life. And I know we are experiencing a drop in police officers now, the number of officers now. But I feel like my whole life we have had trouble in these neighborhoods getting the police to respond to our calls. This is not a new thing. This is not only the result of less officers. It's the result of a broken relationship that we have with the police that we need to work on. I think there are other things that we need to work on in order to strengthen the police department and make people want to be police officers, along with making sure we're offering adequate pay. And we need to do that work. So I would actually work on that relationship, fill those vacancies, and then work from there.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. The question once again, Mr. Boozé. Public safety is a hot topic in the city of Richmond. If elected, how will you approach getting more public safety services? This not only includes police officers, but will include parking enforcement, code enforcement, Office of Emergency Services, fire safety, and community policing. You have 90 seconds to respond, Mr. Boozé.
Thank you, sir. Corky Boozé. If you look at this jacket, it says Councilman Boozé. If you look at the other side, this is Shimada, Japan. I traveled there and I met with the police department there to see how their operations work.
Microphone.
And I would bring those operations back. Oh, thank you. I would bring those operations back to the city of Richmond. Pick up this brochure, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a fixed brochure. When you see me there with President Barack Obama, I was invited there with Councilmember Bates. When you see me there with Kamala Harris, our vice president, I was invited there. And you see me, if you've ever been in a function with Gavin Newsom,
15 seconds.
you would know that he always asks, where's Corky? And guess what? How would I do it? I would get the money from the state and ask them to help us in the city of Richmond, using the expertise that I learned in China, bringing it back to Richmond. I've always been a high supporter of the Richmond Police Department. I sat on the panel that brought Chris Magnus here. If you remember in the old days, when you saw Chris, you saw Corky. And so when we're talking about these kinds of things, look down here, ladies and gentlemen. See the broken windows of your auditorium? The police didn't even get a chance to respond because we were short police officers. Why? Because the RPA took the money from them, and you don't take money from public safety. That's why your streets are like that. I will, on the first day, put an item on the agenda that we put in money back to the police department, and not 165, but 200 like we had with Chris Magnus. That's what I do. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boozé. Before I get to question number 2, just a reminder on the timer. We have the green light, the yellow light, and the red light. The yellow light in the middle can be kind of tough to see with the sun on it. But when that light comes on, you have approximately, 15 seconds to wind up. So we want to keep everything timely because hopefully we'll have enough left on the end for the audience to ask some questions directly. So I'm going to move to question number 2. And Ms. Robinson, I'm going to direct this question to you first. The city of Richmond is deficient in providing housing, not only for the unhoused, but for the average citizen looking for housing in the city where they work. What do you propose we can do to get the engine running to provide more housing in the city of Richmond? Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that we can do. I think that we can really focus on the federal funds that are out there going after federal grants to create more low-income housing, to make more market-rate housing. I think we can really take advantage of, we actually should take a survey of all the vacant lots that are around here and figure out how we can do more infill development, like building, like the woman who was here earlier was talking about, building a home inside of a vacant lot and turning open spaces into places where people can live. I think there's a lot of opportunities also to look at affordable housing differently, and I think that using things like community land trusts to make sure that we have like permanently affordable housing, kind of like Atchison Village, right? That we can do that style of a development in other parts of Richmond as well. It doesn't have to just be Atchison Village where you can get long-term affordable housing. I think we can be creative, and I want to offer my services to help do this. I am a very successful fundraiser. I actually have the skills to bring the resources we need, not just to address housing, but to address a whole bunch of issues that are facing Richmond. I have been successful. I will be successful. I just helped to be a part of a team that brought $35 million actually to this district. We're going to Sacramento with the city and 9 other organizations to seal the deal on next Thursday. And it's literally focused on District 3 and District 1 only. It's a geographical grant that's going to bring jobs, housing, better roads, everything. We fought for that for 3 months. This is what I can do. I can help it with housing. I can help it with other things. I went over time. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Garcia, same question for you, and I'll read it again. City of Richmond is deficient in providing housing, not only for the unhoused, but for the average citizen looking for housing in the city where they work. What do you propose you can do to get the engine running to provide more housing in the city of Richmond? You have 90 seconds, Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, so one of my top goals on the City Council is to bring a lot of funding from the state that's currently set for reducing or addressing climate change. And one of the big areas of funding is housing. And these are monies that the city or that the state has designated for areas where there's a lot of public transit, such as the BART station. And these are monies, in many cases, that are designated for Black and brown communities. District 3 checks off a lot of those boxes, and I know exactly where that money is, and I intend to bring as much of it here to Richmond. I also have been involved in various low-income housing projects in the Iron Triangle as president there, and I know that they require a lot of help getting through the planning and design review process. That's an area that I'm really going to focus on, because if we have an amazing project being held up because of a minor issue, that affects all of us here in District 3. And that's something that I'm going to put a lot of energy to. And I also would like for everyone to know some concerns that I have with the grant that Doria just mentioned. She herself will be managing $10 million on behalf of the city. That concerns me if she's on the City Council, where she herself would be writing checks to herself from those $10 million. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Boozé, same question for you, and I will read it again. City of Richmond is deficient in providing housing, not only for the unhoused, but for the average citizen looking for housing in the city where they work. What do you propose you can do to get the engine running to provide more housing in the city of Richmond? Mr. Boozé, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. If you looked at my cell phone, guess what? I've got the direct phone number to Gavin Newsom. I can call him right now, and within an hour, I'll get a call back. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the talents that I have and bring that back to the city of Richmond. But let's talk about housing for a minute. Doria, RPA representative here, supports whatever they do. And always, if you read some of our brochures, it is not about building in the city of Richmond. Our plans and our permits department is just horrible. It takes builders forever to get something done, just like the people were talking earlier. And I got to give credit where credit's due. Councilmember Nat Bates and I did the Hacienda housing project. If you remember that, people of color lived there. Rats, roaches, and everything in the newspaper. Guess what it is now? It's totally rebuilt. But what we also did is we gave vouchers for those who used to live there to come back and be able to live in a very comfortable house. It's not happening. That's the thing I'm going to be dealing with. Kennedy High School is getting ready to get rebuilt. Both of these people don't don't even know that. I want you at the table so when your kids are going to go to Kennedy, they have a school that don't look like a jailhouse. This is what I do. This is what I do. Sometimes I'm a little aggressive, but you know what? I care about the South Side and District 3. I care, and I'm not going to stop caring. On or off that council, I will always fight for you. But building, RPA does not want that building, and you've been reading this stuff. We don't need that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your response. And again, I just want to remind everybody, we want to keep this as collegial and as cordial and as diplomatic as possible. So let's try to stay focused on the issues and the challenges and try to refrain from invoking personalities if we can. We want to keep this smooth and cordial and friendly. All right, question number 3, and I'm going to direct this one starting with you, Mr. Garcia. Neighborhood councils over the years have had a big influence in how city councils have made their decisions on issues that impact the community. The last 4 years, neighborhood councils have been overlooked, and the city council created task forces as its advisory board. What will you do to redirect and involve the neighborhood councils more in the decision-making processes that impacts the neighborhoods?
The neighborhood councils are the voice of the everyday resident here in Richmond. I know that firsthand in the Iron Triangle, and I know that working with all of the neighborhood councils across District 3. I have worked with all of the neighborhood councils to push for a district map that made more sense to all of us. Who understands the district maps nowadays? They don't make sense even to me, and I've had to look at them a lot the last couple weeks. And the issue is that they were drawn by people with zero input from any of the neighborhood councils. We were trying to create a district in the South Side that would unify all of the South Side and that would create a majority black district. Guess what? The city council said no. And in fact, there were even accusations that we were racist for making those recommendations. We can't have this on the city council. We all deserve to have a voice, especially the areas that have been historically underserved. And that's actually one of the main reasons that I'm running, and that's why I've also been endorsed by several of the neighborhood council leaders, because of my commitment to focus and to work so that all of you have a voice on the city council. This is really personal for me because I'm a true product of District 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Same question for you, Mr. Boozé. Neighborhood councils have over the years had a big influence on how the city council has made decisions on issues that impact the community. The last 4 years, neighborhood councils have been overlooked, and the city councils created task force as advisory boards. What will you do to redirect and involve the neighborhood councils more in the decision making that impacts the neighborhoods? Mr. Boozé, 90 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Let me start off with this. With all due respect to you and the rest of the people here, I'm running for a government seat. There's a problem at the government, and the problem has 3 letters. It's called RPA. I'm not picking on anybody special, but I'm letting you know I know where the problem is, and I'm telling you what the problem is. Now, when you were telling me when you were asking about the neighborhood councils, in my brochure, there's some words used across the top of there that says experience, experience, experience. That's me, Mr. Experience. And I started with neighborhood councils with Ivy Reed Lewis when we got it started, if you guys remember. I was at this place here with Joe, when Joe and Mrs. Fisher were taking over from Lily Mae Jones, who was actually Coronado up front. I go way, way back. I go with Mrs. Alton in reference to crime prevention. And now Jan's the president of the neighborhood councils. Your voice needs to be heard. But you cannot let people silence you when they're telling you the truth of what's going on. You know that the problem in the city of Richmond is the council that's sitting there now called RPA. You need to know what people here are representing that group so that when you move forward, you can make your decision responsibly. It's not personal, it's business. That's exactly what it is. And when you have experience, you talk about business. Again, some people like it, some don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boozé. Ms. Robinson, same question for you. Neighborhood councils have, over the years, had a big influence on how city council has made decisions on issues that impact the community. The last 4 years, neighborhood councils have been overlooked, and the city council created task forces as its advisory board. What will you do to redirect and involve the neighborhood councils more in the decision making that impacts the neighborhoods? Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, so when I'm traveling around to Washington, D.C., which I travel and speak on behalf of Richmond, trying to get resources for Richmond, and on Sacramento, I'm usually talking about how I'm actually really proud of our neighborhood council structure. A lot of places don't have that. I think that there's a lot of things that we could do to strengthen our neighborhood councils, like making sure that we have young people, young families, other people coming into the neighborhood councils and really participating in them to give more opportunities for a wider representation in the meetings and in the participation. It's kind of important because, we aren't going to be here forever. We need people coming up behind us who can advocate for the community, advocate for the neighborhoods. That said, I'm going to answer some things that were said about me because I'm so tired of being attacked with lies. I have 20 years of public record history. I was appointed by Gavin Newsom to the State Board of Food and Agriculture. They do an extensive background check. They would know if I was some kind of crazy person who pocketed money in her own pocket. I have never done that. I have never been about that, and anybody who knows and works with me knows that I do not do that. I would not be where I am today building these things if I was that kind of person. The money that I helped win with the city for this community is a win for this community. But these opponents want to spin it and act like it's something negative. It's not something negative. It's something that's going to actually go to community members to improve your houses, to improve the roads, and to improve the parks. That's what we fought for. The administration of those projects is going to be going to actually paying contractors to build the streets or paying people's salaries who get hired on those projects. Not into my own pocket. That's crazy.
We're running short on time, Ms. Robinson.
Crazy. It's crazy.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, candidates, we are on to question number 4. And on that one, I'll start with you, Mr. Boozé. Our infrastructure has deteriorated substantially over the last 4 years. Our streets have not been paved, street signs are not readable, and are not the same in all neighborhoods. How will you bring more equity to all of the city? Mr. Boozé, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you, sir. First thing you got to do is you got to let people know that you respect them that are working on the job. That's the first thing you got to do. Once again, I'm going to use that word, RPA. They stopped the street sweeping. The truth is the truth. Sometimes it's hard, but it's the truth. They stopped the street sweeping. Just take a look. You can ask Ms. Robinson if they did. In reference to how our city looks, it's horrible because people come in here dropping trash everywhere. I just got finished talking to a lady on 17th and Potrero. She says every other day trash is dumped. When I was on the Richmond City Council, ladies and gentlemen, I had the council buy what you call flash cams. There are cameras that are put up on a telephone pole that if you see somebody doing something, it flashes and sends it. But guess what? When you call the police department, they don't have enough people to go out and look at it. So how would I do that? Well, the way that I would do that is first put the morale back in our community, add more cleanup crews out there, and also let them know that they're being appreciated as a job that they're coming to every day. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you have to look at what your government has caused you for the last 4 years, and is it Corky or is it the old government? Take a look, and that's why we're sitting here to try to replace them. This is nothing negative against anybody. It's just the truth. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boozé. I'm going to move to that question to you, Mr. Garcia. I'll read it again. Our infrastructure has deteriorated substantially over the last 4 years. Our streets have not been paved. Street signs are not readable. and are not the same in all neighborhoods. How will you bring more equity to all of the city? Mr. Garcia, 90 seconds.
So first of all, we need leadership that has vision, that can bring funding and create tax revenue here in the city of Richmond. Every day that I see the backup on the Richmond Bridge, that reminds me of the lack of vision currently in Richmond. Those are all jobs and potential tax revenue that's going into Marin County. And to make it even worse, we have to breathe in this huge puff of particulate matter every morning that's way worse than anything the refinery ever puts out. And so my focus will be on making sure that we have sufficient tax revenue so that we do have a well-funded street cleaning and a well-staffed police department. Because nowadays, if someone calls that someone dumped down the street from their house, there's no one we can turn to. No one. And that's related to both the reduction in our police department and also to cuts in public services. And you really have to entrust that to someone that has a true vision and that knows how we can address these issues in the long term. Because we only have currently leadership that thinks about the currently and not, hey, we need to invest on our streets and our neighborhoods. Because areas like District 3 deserve long-term investments so that our streets can look the same as they do in Point Richmond. Thank you.
Same question for you, Ms. Robinson. I'll read it again. Our infrastructure has deteriorated substantially over the last 4 years. Our streets have not been paved. Street signs are not readable and are not the same in all neighborhoods. How will you bring more equity to all of the city? Ms. Robinson, you have 90 seconds.
I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to start by saying, and I'm going to say it as clear as possible, I have not now, and I have never been a member of the RPA. I have constantly attacked because that is the way they can shut me up. And that is the way they can diminish the work that I've been doing over the last 20 years. They can say that I'm associated with them because I get along with them. But I get along with a lot of people. I get along with state government. I get along with city government. I get along with county government. I work with all of them to make the change that I've been making. So my answer to this question is we need to grow our general fund. We do that by pursuing new business. There's a great program happening right now that I just met with folks at the county. They're pursuing a very large federal grant to bring in funds to do just transition economy work on a large scale, bringing large corporations into a community like Richmond that has a fossil fuel past and create a new future with new corporations that are not emitting chemicals that poison us, and so the county has an initiative. We should be right up in front and central in that initiative, making sure that they cite those corporations here and that those jobs come here. We also need to pursue grants to bring in the money that we need to transform and create the infrastructure that we need to improve our roads, to make our schools better, to make our parks better. We need to be working on both of those fronts, and we need to do it equitably across all areas of the city.
Okay, I'm going to start the next question with you, Ms. Robinson. The city, post-COVID, lost quite a few employees and have had an issue hiring and retaining staff. This impacts residents getting basic services such as permits for building, traffic safety and traffic calming issues, repairing traffic lights, street sweeping and paving. What do you think you can do to assist the city manager with recommendations related to these issues?
Right. So, like I said, I've been doing this work for 20 years. I actually have a lot of relationships with city staff, and the Local 21 actually endorsed me. City staff union endorses me, along with 3 other unions that represent city workers. When they talk to me, they're telling me that they're wearing 3-4 hats, trying to do jobs that they're really not qualified for, and we need to have the funds available in the general funds to hire for those positions so we have more efficiency in our city government. They also say that there's other things that need to be done. They say that there's some people who have been around for a really long time and they know a lot, and there isn't a ladder for them to actually improve and take on other jobs. There isn't a way for them to grow into new positions. So we actually need to create ways that people who have shown devotion to our city and are doing good work can actually move up and improve and take on more responsibility and be leaders. We also need to think of our city externally in a different way. We have so much to be proud of here. We have a story that's strong and proud, and we need to lean into it and actually use it to attract the kind of talent that we need to transform our city. And when you talk to city staff, when you talk to, Shasta, I have a great relationship with Shasta and folks in the city manager's office. That's what they say. Let's work together. Let's lean into this. Let's attract the talent that we need, and let's make it so that the people who have really shown their commitment to Richmond feel heard and are supported to be in leadership positions. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Same question for you, Mr. Boozé, and I will read it again. The city, post-COVID, lost quite a few employees and have had an issue hiring and retaining staff. This impacts residents getting basic services such as permits for building, traffic safety, and traffic calming issues, repairing traffic lights, and street sweeping and paving. What do you think you can do to assist the city manager with recommendations related to these issues? Mr. Boozé, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you for that question. I would do the same thing I did with Bill Lindsay when he was there. You got to get that permits department on fast track so they can, when people come in there with permits and they want to get their plans read and they're gone out. We also need to steal some people from other cities and have them come in here with their expertise. We cannot just keep doing the same old thing. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And that's what's happening in the city of Richmond. Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that within a month or two, that 600 people will be laid off from Hello Fresh over here? Nobody's talking about that. They ran into a problem with thievery. They ran into a problem with harassment of the people. They ran into a problem with homeless people right there creating a problem. What you have to do is you have to, sometimes people don't like what you say. Sometimes you're aggressive, but when you want to go to a party and you haven't cleaned up your room, your mom says, sorry, you ain't going to the party because you had to clean up your room. That's what you need at City Hall. You are going to see a change in this election. Now, I might not be there, but the people coming in will be new. I think that Mr. Garcia is a great person. I enjoy working with him. And you know what? You have to go along and get along to have something come along. And that's in the city of Richmond. I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing, and I'm fighting for you. Experience, experience, experience.
Thank you, Mr. Boozé. Same question for you, Mr. Garcia, and I will read it once again. The city, post-COVID, lost quite a few employees and have had an issue hiring and retaining staff. This impacts residents getting basic services such as permits for building, traffic safety, traffic calming issues, repairing traffic lights, street sweeping, and paving. What do you think that you can do to assist the city manager with recommendations related to these issues? You have 90 seconds, Mr. Garcia.
So as president of the Iron Triangle, I've been calling in to the city council over the last couple years, advocating for various issues. One of the things that I keep hearing, and it's a very common theme, all of our employees in the city feel underappreciated. And that's one of the main reasons why they're leaving in droves. And all of the unions have been also pushing for signing bonuses, something that most cities nowadays are offering. We're not even there here in Richmond. We're not even thinking about that. One of the other things that also concerns me is we're super late in renewing the contracts for every single one of the unions that work in the city. Every single one. So imagine you coming to work and not knowing if the contract's going to be renewed or if the terms are going to change a lot and you suddenly don't know. Like, it creates a lot of uncertainty. And if you look just straight or a few blocks down to San Pablo and they're offering a signing bonus, you get paid more. It's not complicated. We're creating a situation right now with our current leadership that is causing all of this. And that's one of the main reasons I'm running, is to bring a new vision, new leadership into the city council. We can't have this anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Going to move to question number 6, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Boozé. And that question is, how do you define community policing?
You know, it's really interesting that you say that, because if anybody knows Corky, I've always been with community policing. The slogan on the back of the police car I wrote with Chris Magnus, and that's what you see every time you see a police car come by. How do I define community policing? Exactly what I did with Chris Magnus and with Bill Lindsay. Come to the community. Follow the name, community policing. When you have a problem in your community, you go by, find out what it is. They have to know you by first name basis. They are not there as a person who's going to beat you on the head. They're there as people who are going to find out what your concerns are and put it together. You look at what this community did with Chief French. That's what you call community policing. You stand up behind your police department. And when I first started, what really hurts me on the South Side, some people weren't doing things right. And the police had a habit of just putting their foot in their neck and beating them up. And I used to go watch that all the time. And I swore that I would make a change. And I did make a change. And now the police are more friendly. I get along with each and every single one of them. If I call for something, they go overboard. But I want them to do that same thing for each of you. That's how you make community policing. You take your history and you put it with the police and you come together. And it's not a black officer, a white officer, green or blue. It's an officer of the police department that's going to help you.
Thank you, Mr. Boozé. Ms. Robinson, same question for you. How do you define community policing?
So I actually agree with Corky. There's a lot of things about what he said that are right, about community policing. So, when Chief Magnus was here, I actually had a great relationship with him. I see him at Catahoula Coffee all the time. We would talk. He helped us through a lot of issues that we had when we were first getting started on the Richmond Greenway doing the work there. I had some young black youth working for me out at 16th Street. They were out trying to clean up 16th, trying to keep it clean, trying to start moving it in the right direction. And the police came up to them and they threw them on the ground and they put them up against the wall while they were working, and they were trying to tell them that was their job, that they were out there working. And it made it really difficult, young black men trying to do what's right. Live right here, actually lived a couple doors down from this house on 17th Street, trying to do something good in their community. And what community policing was for me in that moment was when I went to Chris Magnus and I said, look what just happened. He brought everyone together with me and we talked it all through, the young men and the police, and they made a relationship together. And then going forward, they had something to work with. And I feel like that is the kind of policing that I'm actually for and want to see more of. I think we need to be really smart about how we're doing it. I think we need to stay within our budget because we don't have all the money in the world, so we have to think about our resources. We're spending more on police now than we have ever spent in the history of Richmond. And so we have to be careful. We have to be smart. But yeah, I believe in that kind of policing.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Garcia, same question for you. How do you define community policing?
So I grew up in Richmond in the 80s and 90s when the cowboys in the police department dominated. And because of that, that was one of the main reasons why I asked to be appointed to the Community Police Review Commission in 2015. And we investigate, as everyday residents, complaints that are given about the police department. One of the things, on my first day, they announced that the Obama administration recognized our police department for being a federal model for community policing. Guess what? Over the last 7 years, that has been destroyed. And is also one of the main reasons I'm running. We need to get back to community policing. We need to see our police officers working for us in everyday situations and not just when we need them, and not just in those emergencies. One of the things that I am involved in is the Cinco de Mayo parade. And every year, the police department is heavily involved in making sure that it's a safe event, but also in being very visible. That's an example of an event where we need to continue having the police department. But I'm really afraid of this upcoming year, if whether they're even going to have the staffing to participate. And honestly, we need that, because we don't need our kids feeling afraid of our police department. We need this community policing back here in Richmond that has been destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We got 2 bonus questions, and I'm going to start with you on this question, Mr. Garcia. It says, arguments have been made that Richmond streets can use a good cleaning. Richmond has a street sweeping plan, but many neighborhoods have lobbied to be exempt from street sweeping and from being required to relocate vehicles so the street sweepers can properly perform their tasks. Now, here's the important part. Tell us your thoughts about street sweeping, and make sure you explain your thoughts about these special neighborhoods who don't have to follow the same rules as the rest of the city. Mr. Garcia, 90 seconds.
So I'm an environmental engineer. I graduated from UC Berkeley, and I have worked my entire career reducing the environmental impacts of various industries and companies. One of the most important things that a city must do to reduce or keep the bay clean is the street sweeping. Because guess what? Everything that is missed and accumulated will end up in the bay. And eventually we'll end up eating that pollution, as scary as that sounds. So it's very important from an environmental standpoint that we do that street sweeping. And that's one of the things that I would like to focus on, because these exemptions greatly impact all of us, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also from an aesthetic standpoint. I know it's annoying to have to move the car. I've gotten tickets in the Iron Triangle, but it's a necessity, and the city needs to do a good job enforcing that. Otherwise, we are looking at streets that will be in horrible shape and continue impacting the fish in the bay. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Robinson, same question for you. Arguments have been made that Richmond streets can use a good cleaning. Richmond has a street sweeping plan, but many neighborhoods have lobbied to be exempt from the street sweeping and from being required to relocate vehicles so the street sweepers can properly perform their task. Tell us your thoughts about street sweeping, and make sure you explain your thoughts about these special neighborhoods who don't have to follow the same rules as the rest of the city. Ms. Robinson, 90 seconds.
Sure. So, unlike Mr. Garcia, who's been employed by Chevron to advocate for the refinery for the past almost decade, until recently, where he works for another petrochemical company, I'm actually an environmental advocate who has been working to clean up our creeks and clean up our neighborhoods for, like I said, over 20 years, and I teach young people how to do it. We actually had the EPA out at the North Richmond Farm recently, the head of the EPA, Jabradika Fox, recognizing our work on clean to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of the Clean Water Act with a few congressmen. That said, I'm also a person who lives here in District 3, and I understand what's happening with parking. And I know other people have experienced how many cars are on the streets these days. And when it's time to do street sweeping and move your car, where are you going to move it? I mean, sometimes you have to move it blocks away to find a park. And everyone knows that we still have issues with crime here. Who wants to move their car blocks away when you can't see it? And people don't want to do that. So we have a deeper problem that we need to address first if we want people to adhere to street sweeping. We need to really address what's happening with parking and what's happening with the number of vehicles that are on the street. We need to actually come up with an answer to that before we can get people to to wholeheartedly participate in the street sweeping program. And that I say that as an environmental advocate who understands what happens to our creeks and waterways when we don't clean the stuff off of our streets. I think we also need to put people first and solve the problems that are preventing the issue, and not just get angry at the issue.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Boozé, I want to read the question again. Arguments have been made that Richmond streets can use a good cleaning. Richmond has a street sweeping plan, but many neighborhoods have lobbied to be exempt from street sweeping, from being required to relocate vehicles so the street sweepers can properly perform their tasks. Tell us your thoughts about street sweeping, and make sure you explain your thoughts about these special neighborhoods who don't have to follow the same rules as the rest of the city. Mr. Boozé, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you for that. Experience, experience, experience. What I'm a victim of is an angry black man because I know the history of what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, what actually happened is when Gail McLaughlin became the mayor, the people in her area were complaining. And so she stopped the street sweeping there. The other neighborhoods said, well, wait a minute, they don't have to move their car, I shouldn't have to move mine. And it goes down the line all the way. But every time you drive up Cutting Boulevard and you look at Steege, what do you see? Trash on both sides of the street. Yes, we need to make them move the cars. Yes, Corky got tickets. Yes, you're going to get a ticket. But you know what? You have to ask yourself, what do you want? Do you want a clean street or do you want to move your car? I understand what Doria was saying, and I appreciate that. But, you know, when you live in a community, what we need to do is put the police back at full force. That parking on corners, parking in driveways, people in wheelchairs can't get by. Angry black man is telling you what he's going to do. So with that, I want to say to you, yes, I support street sweeping. I'm going to continue to support it because I want to live in the community like Lily Mae Jones used to say. You do not have to move to live in a better community. That's where you are today. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Boozé, thank you for your response. And I'm going to start with you on the final question of the prepared questions. So here is the question, Mr. Boozé. In 1990, Congress passed the Base Closure and Realignment Act, also known as the Dellums legislation, which closed the former Point Molate Naval Fuel Station. Part of the legislation required that the closure be an economic engine for the revitalization of the community. Several attempts have been made to develop Point Molate, but none have been met with widespread support from the community. Some members of the community currently are pushing for Point Molate to be turned over to the East Bay Regional Parks. With the future of Point Molate, such a divisive part of Richmond's landscape, perhaps you can tell us whether the issue of park versus development should be placed on the ballot for the people to decide, or should this be left in the hands of a small number of persons serving on the city council? Mr. Boozé, you have 90 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, angry black man. Half of the people in the city of Richmond on the south side don't even know where Point Molate is. We're not sharing that park with everybody. Should we develop that park? You better bet your bottom dollar we should. Should we have sold it for $400? No, we should not. That's why I'm telling you that the council that's sitting there now is creating this problem for you. We should have a building. I have been talking with Councilmember Nat Bates, and I'm not opposed to going back to looking at a casino in that area along with the building because we need money. Look what San Pablo did. They have more money than we ever hoped to have because they followed their leadership and they've made a move. But I want to see housing right now, the infrastructure that gets fixed there, a police station there, and a fire station. But guess what? This council froze on it. They froze on it. And that's why Dellums put that so that the community could have a benefit. And when I speak like this, I speak with aggression because I feel that we've been cheated. And we are consistently being cheated. And we've been cheated since I left that council. So therefore, I'm going to stay on top of it. Yes, building should take place in Point Molate. Thank you.
Same question for you, Ms. Robinson, and I'll read it again. In 1990, Congress passed the Base Closure and Realignment Act, also known as the Dellums legislation, which closed the former Point Molate Naval Fuel Station. Part of that legislation required that the closure be an economic engine for the revitalization of the community. Several attempts have been made to develop Point Molate, but none have been met with widespread support from the community. Some members of the community are currently pushing for Point Molate to be turned over to the East Bay Regional Parks. With the future of Point Molate such a divisive part of Richmond's landscape, perhaps you can tell us whether the issue of park versus development should be placed on the ballot for the people to decide, or should this be left in the hands of a small number of persons serving on the city council? Ms. Robinson, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Yeah, so I think that the park, Point Molate, was already on the ballot, and that people voted not to have a casino there, and that's where we find ourselves today. I think that it's a false dichotomy. It's a false choice to say park versus development. I think we really should be asking ourselves, like, what kind of park can we have that also supports development? I look at Chrissy Field, I look at the Presidio, I look at the Lucasfilm facility at the Presidio, and I say, why can't we have something similar to that in the old Winehaven or in the old barracks that are there? You know, something that brings in a lot of money is not housing, because housing would be very dangerous. Everybody remembers the fire of 2012. Do we really want to put a whole bunch of people living right on the backside of the refinery? What if something happens? You know? But people working there, like the Lucasfilm facility, or like that kind of things, or people going for the day to enjoy the park, where we could have businesses set up where people can, eat some good food and do things like that. That's the kind of development where you can have both. You can have both. You actually just need what Oscar said, vision. You need vision. And I feel like that's the thing that we are lacking. We wouldn't be having this fight if we had a better vision for how we can have the best of both worlds in that space. We can preserve the environment and we can have economic activity.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Garcia, I'll read the question once again for you two. In 1990, Congress passed the Base Closure and Realignment Act, also known as the Dellums legislation, which closed the former Point Molate Naval Fuel Station. Part of that legislation requires that the closure be an economic engine for the revitalization of the community. Several attempts have been made to develop Point Molate, but none have been met with widespread support from the community. Some members of the community are currently pushing for Point Molate to be turned over to the East Bay Regional Parks. With the future of Point Molate such a divisive part of Richmond's landscape, perhaps you can tell us whether the issue of park development should be placed on the ballot for the people to decide, or should this be left in the hands of a small number of persons serving on the city council? You have 90 seconds to respond, Mr. Garcia.
The voters should decide, no doubt. The reason being is currently, to save it, to keep it as a park, $36 million that could have been used here in District 3 were reallocated to save the park. Is everyone here okay with that? Exactly. So if you had the choice between investing the money to save the park or to invest it here, I know I would vote to reinvest that money here in District 3. And I think all of you deserve to have that choice. And going back to Doria mentioning that I worked for Chevron, yes, I worked for Chevron and I own it. I worked as an environmental engineer, mainly in San Ramon, managing state climate policy, and that's how I currently got my current job, not for a petrochemical, but for a biofuels company that's been the single biggest reducer of greenhouse gas emissions, or the emissions that cause climate change, the single biggest reducer in the state. I'm very proud of being a manager there, because I'm learning about all these state monies that right now the governor just issued another $50 billion, and I intend to bring a piece of the pie here to Richmond. So I'll end it with, we all need to own who we are in our background, and Doria definitely has not been doing that during that campaign. And I don't understand that. So please keep that in mind when it comes time for you to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Thank you, Mr. Boozé, and thank you, Ms. Robinson. Now, this was the prepared portion, the questions that were prepared in advance for the candidates. So the question that I have for our organizers here today, Mr. Fisher and other members of the Neighborhood Council, is approximately 3:30 now. We can open up the floor to those in attendance to ask questions. How much time do you want to allocate? It's about 3:30 now. Program started at 2 o'clock. give me some direction and we'll operate accordingly.
30 minutes.
Okay. So we got about 3:30 now, so we'll go.
The total form for 2 hours.
Okay.
So now it's an hour and a half.
All right. So with that in mind, what we'll do is we'll open up the floor to those of you in attendance. If you have specific questions, you can direct your question to any one of the candidates. But I think it would be appropriate and in order if you direct the question to one candidate. If one of the other candidates also wants to respond when the initial candidate is through, then we'll give them an opportunity to do that. So if anyone has a question, I will bring the microphone to you. Oh, you got an extra, Joe? Is that one working?
Yes, it's working.
Let's make sure it's working.
Testing. It's working.
All right, so we've got a working microphone to go to those of you who want to pose questions. So if you raise your hand, the microphone will be delivered. We got a question there, Joe. And direct your question to the candidate.
Hi, my name is Debbie McIntyre. I live in Park Plaza. I've heard mention of Pullman, Iron Triangle, Coronado, but I don't ever hear anything about Park Plaza. We're on the other end of cutting for, I know Corky knows, but the other two may not. But just that's an aside. So this is for Doria. Been a lot of talk about your current employer. My question is, and for the record, if you should win this seat, are you going to step down from your position? Are you going to resign? Or will you continue with the nonprofit along with sitting on the city council?
Yeah. So, like many people who get elected to city
It's
office.
it's a yes or no. Will you step down?
Yes or no what?
Will you step down from your current
No,
position?
I will not.
Thank you.
And I will follow all the FPPC rules, and I will follow all the direction from city and county council on what I should do to make sure that there is not a conflict of interest. So we've actually talked to county council, and we've actually talked to FCP. I'm getting all the things wrong. We've talked to the folks in charge of elections and asked them about this grant and about everything. And they told me that there is a rule that I can give you the number for in the law that says if you work for a nonprofit, that it is legal for you to retain your job on the nonprofit and hold elected office. All you have to do is recuse yourselves from any decisions around that grant. And that's what I will do. I will follow that rule. As I have been law-abiding my entire life, I will follow that rule and make sure that I'm following the law. You know, I have been committed to urban Tilth like for the better part of my life. You know, I employ 58 people, young people from this community, and we're building more things. There's other things that I need to get done before I can step away. I'm putting leadership in place so this next young people from Richmond can take over. But there's things that I still need to do to make sure that transition happens. So if I get elected, I will follow all the rules, I will follow all the laws, but I am not going to leave people in a lurch. I'm going to pass on this organization in a good way so the next generation can take it on without letting the ball drop.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your response. Question over here, Joe.
Hi. Speaking of businesses, Mr. Garcia? Mr. Garcia?
Yeah.
Speaking to the microphone.
Speaking of businesses, I want to talk about Measure U and how it's impacting the city of Richmond, like Costco and the car dealerships wanting to leave because of the taxes. They can go to Pinole and pay a lot less tax than the city of Richmond. So, what would you do to combat that?
Thank you for the question. So as part of my canvassing and getting to know the folks who work and live in the district, I've met with a lot of small business owners, and they don't understand how to comply with Measure U. And as part of that, they're also not, in many cases, not even paying their taxes because they don't know what they owe. And so the key will be to create convene a work group that will include those in the business community so that we can write a tax code that makes sense to everyone. A business planning to come here in Richmond should not be hit with surprises. You know, it's very simple things. Let's have a tax code that is similar to San Pablo, El Cerrito, Pinole, so that the businesses come here and not to Marin. Remember my analogy earlier? I'm willing to bet that Marin does not have a Measure U. And so one of the first things that I will prioritize is convening this group that is definitely not dominated by the business community, but that ensures that they have a voice in the process, especially the small businesses, because they're the ones that create the most jobs here in Richmond. I'm talking about the restaurants, the printing shops. We need those businesses here in Richmond because they generate a ton of tax revenue, and we've been missing out on that, and it's getting worse under Measure U, unfortunately.
Can I also answer the question?
Yes, Ms. Robinson.
Right.
So we didn't get to answer the last question.
I'm sorry?
We didn't get to add anything to the last question, so I just want to be clear on that.
Well, to be clear on the format,
Yeah.
if anybody, any of the candidates want to counter a question, just let it be known, and we'll open the floor to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I wish I knew that for the last question. Okay. Thank you.
He said it.
Right. So Measure U is a really interesting thing. When I talk to city staff about vacancies, one of the things they point to is Measure U being the reason why we have the funds to actually fill the vacancies that currently exist on city staff. That's across the board. So that's fire, that's police, that's city vacancies. Measure U. Measure U. That's what's making the funds possible to fill those vacancies. 2, Measure U. For Measure U, the vast majority of businesses got a tax cut. A tax cut. And that's the thing that people aren't really saying. Number 3, there is not an exodus of businesses from Richmond. There are a few big businesses because they have the large gross profit who are complaining because their taxes went up. Whereas before they were paying very, very little and now they're paying more. This is something that was passed by the voters. It could definitely be tweaked. It could definitely be improved. But I don't think the fear mongering that's happening around Measure U is helpful or accurate. I think that there's always ways you can improve what you're doing. And I think that we should spend a lot more time talking about the strengths of Richmond, working with that county group that's bringing very large businesses with vision in bioengineering and other things to Richmond that don't pollute our environment. And I think we should be focusing our energy there, tweaking things to make things better, getting more big business to come here, and really, supporting what's great about Richmond.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. I think Mr. Boozé wanted to interject.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you know where the bones are buried, you don't have to dig far to get them because you know where it is. Measure U is horrible. Measure U, as an elected official, I would think that you would bring your big businesses or any business to the table and tell them what you're working on. This is a punishment, ladies and gentlemen, a punishment because they don't like Chevron. Whether you like them or not, I don't care. But when it's going downhill and picking up my mom and pop grocery stores and doing stuff like that, it's ridiculous. If I am elected to that council, the first issue will be to revisit Measure U and lower it down. Do you realize that Costco was getting ready to put a second store at Hilltop? It died. You know why? Because of Measure U. They're paying too much money. And the question is, that council that you have there right now made that decision. We can agree to disagree. We don't have to holler and scream at each other, but we have to be business savvy. I am a businessman. I own 3 businesses. So therefore, when you're talking about experience, that's where experience comes in. If you check yourself, they never asked anybody about Measure U. They just put it on and they called it a Chevron punishment. That's exactly what's happening. When I hear Doria talking the way she's talking, I get a little scared because I just think that we need to get a little farther in business-wise. Let the business people come to the table. Give them a chance, and then you get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boozé. Anybody else in the audience with a question for the candidates? Bishop Jackson.
Yes, all the candidates and to everyone here. You know, I just like to see who's going to represent the small businesses. You know, in District 3, cutting used to be like Black Wall Street. I mean, we had stores, we had cleaners, we had everything, video shops. Everything was kind of like, Black owned and operated. So, what are we going to do about the smaller people, that have to come up and do business like Fortune 500 companies when we might not have the funds to do it like that. So who's going to represent the small businesses?
All right, Mr. Boozé, I saw your finger.
You know what? Let me give credit to Doria first, and I'll come in afterwards. Go ahead, Doria.
Go, Ms. Robinson.
Okay, so not a lot of people know this, but one of the things I have been doing for the last 7 years was I started a business incubation organization called Cooperation Richmond, and we help small businesses get started in Richmond. We actually have a non-extractive loan fund that makes capital available for businesses without taking any collateral, and actually working with the businesses so they can build their business without needing to have like the stellar credit and other things that banks do, and actually give a lot of coaching. So I really believe in small business development. I mean, I went to Pat's Paper Shack. I got my Chico sticks from there. I can see how Cutting Boulevard, McDonald Boulevard, how not just Snapper Seafood, but other things could be built along Ohio, and it would be built with small businesses. So in my brain, the way that we do that is we look at the services that the city currently provides to businesses and see how small businesses are falling through their nets. Because there are services, there are capital, there's loan programs, there's other things, but a lot of the times those things are actually not accessible, especially for low-income people of color who are running businesses here. And I think we need to look at how those programs are run and figure out how they can actually serve business members better. When I talk to the different folks along 23rd Street, they say nobody from the city ever talks to them, ever comes to them, ever says, what can we do? I think there's a bunch of things. Actually, one program that the new person in the city office is doing is this program to improve the facades of businesses, helping them improve their facades in a buy local campaign. So I think having a whole suite of services like that are better serving our small businesses is what I would push for and do. And I would feel really passionate to be about it.
Mr. Garcia, did you have anything you want to add?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Richmond when driving into cities like San Pablo, the Richmond side was always better. And now when you drive on 23rd Street, the San Pablo side is a lot better. The businesses have much nicer facades. The streets are freshly paved. There's a lot of lighting, and it just looks way nicer. San Pablo is very business friendly. They've been recently taking more and more of our businesses. And it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's partially related to Measure U, but it's also related to leadership that doesn't prioritize the business community. And that's something that I heard that actually Doria alluded to, that the city council right now doesn't even reach out to them. They're not a priority. And we need to make them a priority because they create our jobs. I even remember when I used to catch the 676 from on Harbor Way, and it used to go down Cutting. I remember all the barbershops and the various black-owned businesses that were along Cutting even in the 80s and 90s. And a lot of them are gone now. And it's because of that lack of attention, that lack of vision. And it's ironic, when I was canvassing during the campaign, I saw a few buses that go to Marin that were in some cases full. And these are people going to their jobs in Marin that they could have here in Richmond. And it's all due to that lack of vision and leadership here in Richmond. And we need new leadership to change that. Thank you.
Mr. Boozé.
Thank you so very much. That is my question. When I came to the city of Richmond from the 80 freeway up there, started off with Chris's Texaco. Left Chris's Texaco, came down to my gas station, which was Boozé Mobile, which Joe Fisher and Maxine used to shop at. From there, we went down to People's Choice Barbecue, across the street to Ron Rome's liquor store, to Marita's across the railroad tracks, on down to, let's see, right after that came
Jones and
Mr.
Harris.
Marshall. Me and Marshall down at the other end, and then you went on the bridge. These are things that we lost. You don't have that anymore. And ask yourself why. And that's what I was fighting for, and that's what put me in politics in the beginning. When I first started politics, I say, how come black folks don't have places like the rest of Richmond? Well, in order for you to be able to change the rules, you have to be up there where you can change the rules, so we get something. They claim we didn't have enough housetops for us to have grocery stores. Well, that's not true. Look around and see what's happening with the grocery store. We still don't have any. I worked to help Isaiah Turner become the city manager, and they went after Isaiah because Isaiah was teaching me how to go about doing things. Ladies and gentlemen, when is it going to be your time? When are you going to have somebody there that represents you? When I used to bring people to the city council, they called it, remember, Corky's Army. Guess what? They were all people of color. And Tom Butt said, I'm sick of Corky's Army. Because you know what? I told them, you have a voice. You should be heard. I will continue to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boozé. Anybody else with a question? We got Naomi Williams, then we have another question. No, the microphone is right behind you.
I have a question that is for Corky. Mr. Boozé.
Speak into the mic.
I will. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question for Corky Boozé. I know that it takes years for the city to sign permits for people to even get jobs. Not only jobs, to get permits to open businesses. What will you do to speed up the slowness that the city has in approving jobs for all businesses, for people that comes in and want to be in business?
Okay, in reference to what you were just saying about speeding up the permits, first thing, as I said before, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I have sold the old Ron's liquor store to Owen's daughters who are trying to build an apartment over there. And I carried the paper for her so she didn't have to worry about it. I said, I'll be your bank. And it did the same thing with Mark's barbershop. Mark started over there with Owens, and Mark now has 3 barbershops. I did that. I won't use the word I. Ask Mark, he'll tell you. And so the problem that we have is they can't get their plans through city. How would I do that? I would go out with the city manager and say, I need you to go with me to other communities and look at how they do things. Then I would get the name and address of that person that we dealt with and we felt that was a good person, look up their background, bring them into the city of Richmond, and add more people at that counter. I get so upset that you go to city council and at 2 o'clock they're gone home. I get so upset when I go rattle the door at City Hall and nobody's there because they're at their house. Let's blame COVID as much as we can. But you know what? We can work past COVID. But that's just an excuse for us. So for your question, I would bring other people in here just like they steal people from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boozé. Ms. Robinson's hand is up.
Yeah, so just, we've been trying to build this farm in North Richmond, and the biggest hell we've been in has been permits. It has literally slowed down the project almost 9 months. And, we've been ready to go, ready to build, waiting. And so I definitely think there's a lot that we can do to speed up the process around permitting. I also feel like, just as somebody who has been in an executive director role, there's things that you can do in terms of performance evaluation that can incentivize people moving projects forward. You can actually make it a measure of success of a department the number of projects or businesses or whatever that they get, approved and moved on. If we set some business development goals that we want to see X number of small businesses, supported in the business development department, or X number of housing projects, and have that be a deliverable or a measurable outcome of departments, that would help drive departments, city staff towards a specific measurable goal. And hold them accountable for it. And really, if there's something that gets in the way of them achieving that goal, then you can talk that out and figure it out. But I think as a manager, you usually look for things like that that can help drive and improve outcomes. So, that's the kind of thing that I would do.
Mr. Garcia.
So as part of my role on the Iron Triangle, I mentioned this earlier, I am involved with several developments in the neighborhood. One of the projects that I was heavily involved in was when St. John's Missionary Baptist was trying to build a community center there on 8th Street in their North Campus. And they were running into some issues with design that I felt were relatively minor. And we in the Neighborhood Council were very active in helping bridge that gap so that they could get their permit. And as part of that process, I realized that there's a lot of really amazing projects stuck because of, in many cases, very minor issues. So one of the things that the state has recently done, mainly focused around housing, is they've simplified the permitting process for things that are deemed high priority. And we need to do that here in the city of Richmond. So we can hire more people, but if the workload is still big, we could still have the same issue. So we need to simplify these requirements. I'm not saying let's make unsafe buildings or etc. What I'm saying is we need to learn from prior reviews and approve these permits quicker. And there's now simpler ways of doing that. And we need to bring that to Richmond, just like the state is pushing with housing. So one of the benefits of my current job is I hear about all of the state programs, and it helps me have the ideas to push for the same thing here in Richmond. And having a simplified permitting process will definitely be something I will be pushing for.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I think you had a question earlier.
Hi, my name is Barbara Holman. I'm a Southside resident on 19th Street. So my question goes back to the question about development of Point Molate. My question goes back to the development of Point Molate and the old whaling station. So many things have been on the table for that. And I think the first thing they need to look at is the environmental impact, because that freeway on-ramp and off-ramp there is a problem. That's the first thing. Second thing, who's going to clean up Point Molate? Since it was a fueling station, who does the cost fall to clean it up? Okay, so if it's going to be a state park or something, I figure that they should develop something that will bring more revenue into the city. That's what I think.
Was that directed at anyone in particular?
I'm sorry. I think I was looking at Mr. Garcia first of all for environment.
Well, thank you for the question. So a lot of the heavy and sort of more toxic cleanup was actually paid for by the federal government. I believe actually Mr. Don Gosney was involved in the community group that helped, give the community input as part of that cleanup. But if more cleanup is needed, I think that falls under the responsibility of the developer. I mean, that's how it falls. If I were to buy a piece of land and want to develop it, I would have to pay for the cleanup, not the city. So I think we need to make sure that is what happens, because it shouldn't come out of my pocket and none of your pockets either. The other part too, I agree that the exit into Point Molate is not the best, it's not the safest, and that obviously would need to be changed if any type of housing would go there. I agree 1,000%. But in terms of the cleanup, it should not be us. And I will definitely push for that. And based on my experience with permitting and environmental reviews, I can ensure that that doesn't fall under our laps. Thank you.
Mr. Boozé, Ms. Robinson, did you have anything you want to add on that?
I definitely want to have something to add on that. Point Molate, you have a good point there. Do you realize that we on the south side of town rarely use Point Molate? Do you realize that Tom Butt, your mayor, changed the name of Point Molate to Stenmark Drive for a guy that never lived in the city of Richmond? You got George Livingston, Lily Mae Jones, and any other person could have their name. My first order of business is to bring that back to Point Molate. Richmond is known as Point Molate, not Stenmark Drive, but that was done. Secondly, I agree with Doria about the park and everything, but you know what? You can have the park and have the development at the same time. Come on, folks, don't play us dumb. You know, the park district wants the whole thing. We can't do that because we needed the money coming in for the city of Richmond. And with that, ask yourself and look at your history. How have you ever, as a kid, had an opportunity to go to Point Molate? They didn't let us know about it. And then they closed it down at 7 o'clock so that if you went there, you'd have to leave. Or you got a party of too many people that look like you. That's what has happened in Point Molate. I am totally agree with Oscar there. I think that we should have the development. I've been fighting for the development, and I want to make sure you folks use that park. That Point Molate Stenmark Drive got to go out the window, and we have to, as a community, pick a name that represents us. It's on our side of town, so let's get together and get it done. And furthermore, that guy that just sat down, Don Gosney, has more history on Point Molate. He had a committee. They killed the committee because he knew too much. You got to work on it, ladies and gentlemen. Get what you deserve.
So, just adding to that, just want to agree, I'm going to say it again, that I said it before, that I believe you can have a park space and you can have development. We need to choose the right kind of development that doesn't put people in jeopardy by having housing near a very dangerous industrial area with, you know, the whole refinery there and everything. I also think that we need to be smart about the money. So, if we're developing something out there and we develop houses, the infrastructure to support those houses would actually fall to the city to pay for, the city to maintain, the city to provide services. And that's something that does not pin out, just housing does not pin out in terms of the costs that would ultimately come to the city over the years, as opposed to business development, where you would have not just the development of the project, but also the potential taxes from the business, you know, activities that could help support the project. So I think we need to be smart. I think we need to, you know, also think about where it is and what's going to be the safest, best thing for that site. And, you know, it is also, just because we in the past have not had access to public space doesn't mean that we need to bring that into the future. You know, and I agree, we should rename the street to be somebody that represents us. So there's my comments.
We agree on that.
Yes, we agree.
Okay, I'm the president of Park Plaza Neighborhood Council. And this question can go to anybody on the panel there. I have a housing project, a housing development project that has been ongoing since 2006. It is the housing development that was supposed to be constructed when the nurseries, the Sakai and Owishi nurseries were taken down. Now this project is sitting there, and you'll see it. If you go down 80, you see it every day. I want to know what you can do. It's been 28 years since we started that project. And it appears every time we get to the edge, the council finds another reason why that should not be developed. Mind you, this is housing for workforce. This is housing that is specifically for teachers, firemen, policemen, whomever that work in this city, can buy housing and live next to park, next to a grocery store, have a thoroughfare to Marin County, whatever. And the city has sat on this for 28 years. What can you do for me? Thank you. Anybody?
I know the project you're talking about. And actually, my grandfather lives in the senior housing that's right there on the other part of the facility now. And I was actually a part of some of the conversations when they're first talking about what could be there. I don't understand I don't want to be honest. I don't understand all the parameters of this project and what's going on and why it has been caught up. I know that when they were talking to us, a part of the project was a brownfield. It had the history of the nurseries, and they use a lot of toxic materials and things like that. I'm not sure if that's the thing that's catching it up, but I think that it's not, So, it's not. So what I would do is that I would organize around it, right? I would convene people. I would make a point that we need this kind of housing, that people can't afford to live here, especially the service workers that we're trying to, bring to our city, to keep in our city. And I would make it a housing issue and bring people to the table and figure out what the thing is and go to the media, go to other things and organize around it until we push through whatever the barriers are. Housing is super important. That's a great location for potentially building. I'm sorry? I'm saying as a city council member, if I was elected, I would use the position to shine a light on that particular project and try to bring, whatever resources, whatever attention we need to keep it, to push it through. Or to figure out what it is that is holding it up, or who it is that is holding it up, and then and figure it out, move it forward. Housing is really important.
All right, Mr. Boozé, I know you wanted to respond to that.
Okay, let me start off with a shout out to Park Plaza, because that was my old neighborhood council, and so I just wanted to put that in. In reference to what you were just talking about, once again, experience. If you don't know what's going on, you can't very well make changes. There's no toxic there. That's all been cleaned up. That's all been taken care of. I have seen you at the city on numerous occasions complaining about that. They finally got a little bit done, and then they didn't do the rest. And they gave excuse after excuse after excuse. Once again, you hate to hear me say the word, but the black community is always brought in last. They did a development out there on McDonald Avenue. They did developments all over the city of Richmond. But when we come and ask, and we're a little group like this, they don't want to hear what we have to say. You know what? You deserve that. Question. What would you do? Exactly what I'm doing standing here. You vote for me, guess what? You're going to see something happen. It's not going to be like it used to be, because it was Corky against 6 other council people called the RPA. So whatever I brought up, remember? 3-minute recess. Every time Corky took an issue, there was a 3-minute recess. Go in the back room and be good, and maybe we'll let you come back out. Well, I was fighting for you, the people. If you fight for me and you get me reelected, I'm telling you, I will make sure your stuff gets done, because I do believe that the council's going to change and the RPA will not control it anymore. And you'll get your project. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Garcia.
So first of all, I think I'm the only candidate that knows the name of the project, the Miraflores project. And that's based on my work in the last couple years, having actually written emails in support of Park Plaza. And I honestly want to apologize to Park Plaza. It's ridiculous, 28 years that we can't get housing that would really make a difference in Richmond. It's a huge project, and I've seen pictures of how dilapidated and unmaintained it is now, and that's a reflection of our current city council. We see that everywhere throughout the city, and I really want to apologize to Park Plaza that you've been ignored for 28 years. I will change that. All of District 3 deserves to be heard, and these type of projects, it's a travesty that they've been sitting for so long, and I know it's due to the teeny tiny little issues that I mentioned earlier that are being used to stop important projects throughout Richmond. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to be timely with this, and the intent was to shut it down at 4 o'clock. I had 2 people who asked me if they could pose questions. So we're going to give these 2 people an opportunity to pose their question, and once these 2 are complete, then we're going to end the program because we want to be respectful, mindful of your time. So, Bishop Jackson, I know you have a question.
A comment. You know, there's been an exodus of black people in the city of Richmond. And I don't even know where they went. I don't know where they went. You know what I'm saying? But who is going to be the Moses and the Jeremiah to bring our people back to Richmond? Mr. Garcia.
So, gentrification is a huge issue. It's an issue that's especially affecting District 3. The district, or the south side that I grew up in, especially when I was going to Kennedy, is way different now. And part of that is that we're not investing in ensuring that people are making that their salaries are sufficient to be able to afford homes here in the area. And so I take that back to, you know, having those businesses, the minority-owned businesses especially, that will employ people and create those good jobs. In addition to bringing in industry that will help Richmond have the jobs so that people can settle and stay here in Richmond. That's one of the main reasons why I've been endorsed by several unions that do the construction all over the county, because they know I will bring jobs to Richmond. And part of that, we have to be honest. There's inherent racism in how we run the city. We can't lie about that. And we have to be honest and address it, and convene some work groups to address it once and for all. Because I find it ridiculous that Park Plaza has to wait 28 years for a project, and I know for a fact that there's other neighborhoods that gets prioritized and streamlined currently by the current city council. We need to address this racism now.
So, yeah, when I was growing up here, you know, I grew up in a black neighborhood. 5th Street was a black neighborhood. South 12th Street was a black neighborhood. All these areas. I used to run out in and out of everybody's houses. I had a bunch of aunties everywhere. That's what it was. It's really changed. Even my mom, who grew up on Wall over by Kennedy, is a black community. Things have really, really changed. There's a lot of different reasons driving that. We could talk about that. But I believe in the right to return. So I believe that as we're developing this new housing, as we're developing the low-income housing, that we should be reaching out to those people in communities who have been pushed out and saying, you know, if you are a former Richmond resident or whatever, we need to be outreaching to you as we make these improvements and bringing you back. A lot of the work that I've been doing at Urban Tilth includes things like that, and then some of the work that I do outside of it. So I think, yes, we need to be supporting the development of black businesses. It's explicitly, you know, black businesses. I'm actually involved right now with my partner in the development of a black wellness center over on Ohio Avenue, because I feel like we also need a comprehensive black, explicitly black space where people can go and learn about opportunities, learn about jobs, learn about health and wellness, learn about how you can improve your credit and buy a first house and all that stuff in a black wellness center, a whole wellness center. We can have a Latina center. I think that is good, but we also need a space for us. And that's how we build strong, and that's how we develop, you know, our community and bring people back. So I have a lot of ideas about that. We can talk more offline.
Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to be upset because you're African American. You should get what you deserve. One of the biggest fights that I had on the city of Richmond, there it is, Corky again, uncontrolling. There's a group, you know the 580 freeway out here? Well, his son came together, and Joe, I might need some help with you on this, the name of the people that were buying all the dilapidated houses in the city of Richmond and fixing them up. and they took the money and ran with it. I can't remember the name of the group right now. But I fought against that because I felt if you could come into Richmond and get the houses through code enforcement, what they did is they went to code enforcement when they took your house. Then they fixed it up and they sold it for a profit and pushed you out. And I told Mr. Knox I was not going to go for that because if you're going to take those houses, take a percentage of that money and put in a fund so that black folks can buy back into their community. That did not happen, and I was outvoted. So when you ask that question, Bishop, it's a good question. It's not black flight. It's about that they put us in a place where we could no longer be able to afford our housing. Now, Mike Davenport lives right down here on Marina Way. If you remember what that park looked like, I'm the one that changed that park and put the field in it. We're not using it now, but the scoreboard, the ladies for breast cancer running around the park, I'm the one that did all that. And so when you're putting that stuff together, you've got to give us some feeling of community, and we will come back. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the very last question this afternoon will be coming from Kathy.
Hi, guys. I'm a resident over on Marina Way. I said I'm a resident on Marina Way South, 14. And my concern today is that I'm excited about the phase 1 of the Greenway from Unity Park all the way to, I guess, Cutting. But my concern is that we are on Marina Way in the midst or in the middle of Coronado Elementary School and Knee Strip. And although I'm thrilled about the bicycle lanes and all of that, the traffic is ridiculous. It is hazardous for our kids crossing the street. Even though there's a crossing guard, there needs to be some kind of way that there is a traffic sign that is posted permanently that says a 25-mile zone. And I've just witnessed an accident 2 weeks ago. A bicyclist was hit at the corner of Bissell and Marina Way because of this fast traffic. And I know we all love to get to the marina, but there needs to be something to address the traffic situation. It is almost a hazard to park your car on the street and get out in the mornings. The cars are going far too fast. That needs to be addressed.
Which one of the candidates? Mr. Boozé, we'll go with you, and then we'll go with Ms. Robinson.
Thank you very much for your question. And I just can't say it that many more times. These people sit around here and talk about the Greenway, Yellow Brick Road, and all that. Ladies and gentlemen, here's history. Lily Mae Jones started that. She started that with a cycle program. It started over there in downtown Richmond and came up. And it was supposed to be Lily Mae Jones. Now they're changing the name to Yellow Brick Road. Guess what? On or off the council, I'm going to fight that all the way. In reference to your bike lane, Don's is standing right next to you. If you've been looking on your social media, he's got guys doing wheelies down McDonald Avenue in front of buses. That's what those bike lanes are bringing. Did they ask you about where they wanted the bike lanes? No, they did not. They put them there. Have you tried to go down Barrett Avenue to get to work in the morning or come home? You're backed up. I think that there was no training whatsoever, and it was give those people what we want them to have, because they're not going to say anything. But I'll tell you what, time is over. You know what? Everything comes around if you stay long enough. And now what you just said, those bike lanes, they're talking about putting them down Carlson Boulevard now. Can you imagine one lane on Carlson? But if you go down to Point Richmond, they get what they want when they want. But I tell you, I don't think in the African-American community bike lanes are that important. I think grocery stores. I think black people moving back into the homes. I think that what they did is they put us out of the city of Richmond. We need to come back. If we do a good job, people will come back and join us. So with that, no bike lanes for me. I'm sorry. They can have some, but not a lot. Thank you.
There is nothing more heartbreaking than to see a black man attack another black man who's trying to do something good in the community. You know, Najari Smith works with young black men and children and young people, teaching them how to build and build bikes. lead rides, do positive things, stay out of trouble. He owns the only worker-owned cooperative bike shop in Richmond, started it with his own money with another black man. He is doing really amazing work in this community. Really amazing work in this community. And he lives in this community as well. So I just have to say that first and foremost. The second thing is, yes, we need traffic calming measures throughout the city. As I'm knocking on doors, one of the chief concerns that people have, and the concern that I had when my kids were little, is people speeding down the street as if they're on the Indy 500, and not slowing down. And we hear that in all of these streets. People are like traffic bump, like speed bumps and other things. I think that we need a comprehensive plan to slow these streets down. And there are plans that are actually being moved in the city government to do that, and we're actually getting federal, state grants to put them in place. But it's piecemeal because we don't have money as a city. We're not a rich community, so we depend on grants to make these things happen. I think we need to publicize what the plans are so people really know, and we need to pinpoint where we need more quick emergency services, because I agree. I live right there at Marina Way, and so I think we actually do need a lot more signs and maybe even like a traffic light or something else, because it's kind of crazy on that street. So I also believe in the kind of governance that don't attack each other as we try to make things better. Like that is the kind of thing that destroys us and community more than anything else. It's not the way we move forward. So.
I agree that we shouldn't be attacking each other. It made me really sad. The city right now is doing traffic calming studies, and several neighborhood councils, many represented here today, advocated for their neighborhoods to be included in the study. Guess what? They weren't. The only areas currently being included in this traffic calming study are the wealthier parts of Richmond Annex and in the Richmond Hills. The only areas by our current city council. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, the racism. They're ignoring us because we're black and brown here in District 3. And that's something that is really motivating me to change, because we deserve to also be included in these good things that happen only in certain parts of the city currently. I feel like cursing right now, but I'm not, because it really upsets me. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our question and answer portion of the program. We certainly want to thank the various neighborhood councils for this collaborative effort, bringing everyone together. I want to give a big shout out to India. Raise your hand, India, who operated the lights on the timer. Huge thank you to Don Gosney, who brought in the audio and the video. He's been doing this throughout the city, so wonderful, Don. We appreciate that. And of course, we definitely want to recognize Joe and Maxine Fisher for hosting this event here in their beautiful yard. Community engagement for decades. So with that, we're going to leave the final word with none other than the great Joe Fisher.
Yeah. All right. He said we've been in the community for decades. That's old. Did you hear that, Nathan Bailey? He said decades. Decades. But you know what? I tell you, it's such an honor. Like I had mentioned before, I want to thank our candidates, Corky, Doria, and Oscar. I've had the opportunity to have known them, all three of them, for years. And it's just amazing that some communities don't have one qualified candidate to sit before you to tell you or tell us what they're going to do for us. Not for them, but for us. And today we had that. And I want to tell you, we really appreciate the three of you. We appreciate the council presidents, Madeline Law here, Naomi Williams. Is Katie still here? John Monks is still here. And believe it or not, Jan here. Stand up, Jan. Jan is over the entire city of neighborhood councils. There are approximately 36 councils in the city of Richmond. Jan is over them, and we want to give her a hand. And then we want to thank all of you, the Coronado Council and the Park Plaza Pullman, Iron Triangle, and the Doris. Doris, stand up, Doris. She came in. She's representing Iron Triangle in place of Oscar here and everything. And I don't know how many of you here knew Bob Dabney.
Maybe. We grew up. He stayed right behind us. He stayed behind my house.
Didn't?
Yeah.
You know he passed away.
Oh no.
Yeah, he passed away. He passed away. So we want to do, if you don't mind, just a solid few seconds for him. And keep his wife in mind. Her name is Cheryl. But again, I want to thank each and every one of you. There's a few that's going to stay to help us take our list down. A few. Madeline laughed. That's all right. I told you. All you have to do is be here. So, ladies and
Joe,
gentlemen,
excuse me. Did we have a closing statement, or you're not going to do that?
the moderator.
Yeah, that's right. That's your moderator jumped the gun on that. Yeah. Everybody was supposed to get a 2-minute closing statement.
Well, I'm gonna set me behind that.
And your moderator's gonna take the hit on that, because he blew that. And we're gonna thank Mr. Boozé for being so gracious to give that gentle reminder. So with that, Mr. Boozé, since you were the great reminder,
No, we started with me. You got to start with Oscar.
we're gonna let Oscar go. We'll move over to Ms. Robinson and we'll close with you. So Oscar, your 2 minutes.
So first of all, thank you all for being here on this great Sunday. I thank God we had some nice weather.
We lose a day?
Saturday, sorry. Great meeting many of you today. And I hope you got to hear and see the experience and the knowledge I've gained over the last couple years working throughout District 3. That's the reason why I'm running. I'm a true product of District 3. I went to the schools, graduated from Kennedy, and my family and extended friends all live here currently. But most importantly, I'm here because I'm hearing you, and I want to make sure all of you have a voice in the City Council. You've been ignored for too long. And I'm here to hopefully make that change for you. I wanted to also share my endorsements that reflect the variety of folks that are behind my campaign, because I'm a bridge builder. I work with everyone throughout the community, and that is important for District 3 so that we can have these programs and activities here in the district. My endorsements include BWAPA, Black Women Organized for Political Action, former Mayor Irma Anderson, Lisa McIntosh, Doris Mason from the Iron Triangle, and various other community leaders that have seen me working and doing things when no one is looking, because I truly care about this community. I wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be knocking on all of your doors throughout the district if I didn't care. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to live in neighborhoods that we're proud of. We all do. Not just the wealthy parts of Richmond, but we deserve that here in District 3. So please, if you haven't voted yet, please consider voting for Oscar G for District 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Robinson, your 2-minute closing statement.
So I wanted to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to speak for myself here today, to try to really expose some of the lies and the rumors that have been talked about me, and to put forward my vision for Richmond. I love Richmond. I feel like the people who are here give me heart and give me life in a way that no other place on earth really has. And I've traveled, you know. I feel like we have so much to offer. Like our young people, when I employ them, I explicitly employ young people from this community because I feel like that's the way we make change. we empower the people who are here, the people who are often looked over and not given a chance. You know, I have spent 20 years working really deeply in the Black and Brown community. We have a lot of Latinos who work at Urban Tilth who have been served by our services, and a lot of Black folks who are served by our services. And right now, at this point in history, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done to support the Black community that is not being done. And I say that while completely and wholeheartedly also embracing my Latino brothers and sisters who live around here. I feel like there's a lot of things we need to focus on to really make sure that we are healthy as Black people in Richmond and we have a place to come back to. I have experience. I helped to build Unity Park. I'm building a farm in North Richmond right now. I helped to transform streets. I literally have been employing over 58 people year-round in my job. And those jobs I created. They did not exist before Urban Tilth. You know, we feed people. I have experience. I was actually appointed by Governor Newsom to the State Board of Agriculture. He wouldn't have done that if he didn't believe in the power of what I could do. He wouldn't have done it. This little girl from Richmond grew up on 5th Street. He wouldn't have done it. So consider it. Look me up. Google Doria Robinson. You can Google me. You can learn about everything I've done for the last 20 years. And I would be honored to have your vote.
Mr. Boozé. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And let me clarify something, because this always happens to us. Doria made a statement that she hates to see Black folks attack other Black folks. I was not attacking Mr. Jamari. I did not recall using his name. I was attacking the way young people are riding their bikes down the middle of McDonald Avenue. They need bicycle safety. When you ride in front of a bus doing a wheelie, we hear about you when your mom says you're not around anymore. In reference to my closing statement, I am going to be a pit bull on Nystrom rebuild. See, a lot of these people don't know Nystrom rebuild's coming up, and I want to make sure we get a say in how that Nystrom rebuild is going to be done. Everybody knows me. You want to go to Casper's Hot Dogs? You'll find Corky. I'll be there every day. Whatever your problem is, you say, hey, you know what? We'll ask Corky. We'll go to Casper's. So with that, you know, I hear people talk about endorsements and all that. I have all that stuff. I got all the unions in there. I don't need to talk about that. I need to talk about the people of District 3. You guys came to me and said, we need you back on that council. And you ask your neighbor that. So what you need to do to follow through with that, pick up your telephone. Call that neighbor. Let him say, I can't stand Corky. But that's okay. Some of them will say, yes, I do. And when I'm back on that council, there will be no more 3-minute recesses. Think about it. They don't have 3-minute recesses for the RPA. Now, when Gail and Tom get into it, you know, it was a rule. They call it the Corky Boozé rule. I want to make sure that your voice is heard, because I have my business. I can work with my son. I'm doing this because I love my community. I didn't just start doing this yesterday. Remember, experience, experience, experience. This picture here is me in China. With the top people in China, I brought back a $200 million project called Terminal Number 1. And they stopped that because that's what I brought back. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out. Fisher family, thank you for having me and the rest of us. And I think you're going to see a new council, whoever you pick. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I guess that's all.